I helped design and operate nuclear power plants in the 20th century. As a senior vice president, I had about 400 people working for me at about 70 nuclear reactors around the country. All these nukes that are operating today were designed in the 1960s and in the 1970s when the U.S. wanted more energy. And they believed that they could get that energy cheaply through the splitting of the atom. By 1985, Forbes magazine called this experience with building all these nuclear power plants in the United States the world's biggest managerial disaster in history. Well, trust me, during the 70s and 80s when I was building these power plants, nobody was talking about them being a way to minimize carbon dioxide buildup in the atmosphere. That marketing ploy happened at about year 2000. The goal of building these plants in 1970, when I was at it, was energy shortages and things of that nature. Carbon dioxide was just off the table. Well, I began my career 43 years ago, and I really believed that nuclear power was the right choice for our future. But technological advances have shown me that it's not the viable alternative I once thought it was. Changing times and changing technologies demand new solutions for the 21st century. We're all here tonight because we believe that we know that carbon dioxide and global climate change are real. And they have it's a problem right now. Global climate change hit the threshold, if you believe 350.org, in about 1982. That's when the carbon concentration in the world tripped over the 350 part per million threshold that most scientists will believe will create dramatic changes in climate over time. So we're essentially 40 years into on the wrong side of that threshold. So the operative word here in this discussion tonight is now. What are we going to do now to eliminate or reduce the amount of carbon we're throwing into the atmosphere? What are you going to do? What is Northwestern going to do? What is America going to do? What is the globe going to do to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere right now? We need now solutions, not 20 and 30-year solutions down the road. So signing a treaty in December and committing to goals that are out another 20 or 30 years is, to my mind, unacceptable. We need now solutions. Well, the data make it clear to me that if the world chooses to build more nuclear power plants, that will actually make climate change worse. And that's really my thesis for tonight that I hope to be able to prove. Climate change will be worse if we build the nuclear power plants necessary to reduce carbon dioxide. So here's why. Let's put nuclear power in perspective. 20% of electricity in the U.S. comes from nuclear, but 10% of the electricity in the world comes from nuclear. That includes the U.S. Well, and those percentages are declining. Nuclear's contribution to power is declining over time. But worldwide, the shift is evident, and at the same time, the percentage that renewables provide to the energy mix, electricity mix, is increasing over time. And they crossed over just a couple of years ago, and renewables now exceed nuclear worldwide. But it's not just about electricity. It's about all of the sources that bring carbon into the atmosphere. It's about home heating, and it's about transportation. So when you look at not only electricity, but transportation and home heating, look at all those sources. Nuclear is not a 10% generator of energy. It's a 2% generator of energy. That's right, 98% of the energy that the world uses right now comes from non-nuclear sources. Only 2% comes from nuclear. Well, what does that mean? That means that nuclear power plants operating today have barely reduced or hardly slowed down the amount of carbon dioxide that's entered the atmosphere. So the nuclear industries claim that carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere are greatly reduced from nuclear power in operations today is disingenuous. As of today, there's 450 plants, roughly 50 of those are in Japan, and they've been shut down for years. So, but let's use a 450 number. That's the number of plants available, nuclear plants, that are providing that 2% piece of the pie. So I'm going to do a thought experiment now for about 5 minutes. And I think I can prove that nuclear can't counteract climate change. So let's assume that we want nuclear to provide 20% of the total power, not the electricity, the total power that the world uses. We're going to go from 2% to 20%, a 10-fold increase. At that point, it would make a significant reduction in carbon dioxide. Well, what would that 10%, that increase by a factor of 10, from 2% to 20%, what would it look like? It would mean that we would need 5,000 new large power plants. Now let's say we want to do this increase over 15 years. So we're going to have to build 5,000 new nuclear power plants, or 50,000 of a new gimmick called small modular reactors in the next 15 years. So what that works out to is, beginning today, we would have to, as the world, not just America, but as the world, we would have to put online a nuclear reactor every day to get 5,000 new nuclear reactors in 15 years. And those 5,000 reactors would produce 20% of the global energy demand. Well, there's only 60 nuclear plants under construction right now, and quite a few others are nearing the end of their life. So essentially, there's no real increase in nuclear production based on what's on the drawing boards or what's under construction right now. Not only that, but the manufacturing capability that the world has right now is only capable of about maybe 3 dozen nuclear power plants a year. And the ability to draw uranium out of the mine with the current mining infrastructure is about 500 or 600 plants total. But we need 10 times the mines and roughly 10 times the manufacturing capability in order to scale up nuclear. And in addition, we'd need about 10 Yucca Mountains to store all of the nuclear waste that's going to be abandoned by these 5,000 nuclear power plants. So the data, to me, makes it evident that reaching a goal of getting 20% of the world's power through nuclear is just not feasible. But on the flip side of that is renewables can do that. They are scalable, unlike nuclear. We've already seen the total renewable contribution grow about 7% in the last 10 years. So to imagine it hitting 20% from the level it's at now in 10 years, let alone 15, is totally believable. So the renewable growth is a feasible alternative to hit roughly 20% of our energy demand, whereas the ability for nuclear plants to achieve that with the infrastructure they require and the enormity of the construction projects just make them unscalable for the future. Well, furthermore, and this is a key point in this thought experiment, it costs about $10 billion to build one nuclear power plant. There's 2 down in Florida in Levy County that were $24 billion, so that's about $12 billion apiece. There's two in England that are 32 billion. So give it the benefit of the doubt, and she's 10 billion apiece. So $10 billion times 5,000 reactors works out to $50 trillion to make a 20% dent in our energy consumption. Well, to give you an idea, these are huge numbers, $50 trillion. Americans pay in taxes. Last year, in 2014, the American individual tax payments were 1.5 trillion. So it's 30 times more than America pays in taxes in order to build those 5,000 new nuclear plants if we're going to make a 20% dent in power. So the real question I think we need to face is spending $50,000 on the $50 trillion on the expansion of nuclear power in order to produce 20% of the world's energy, is that the best way to reduce carbon dioxide buildup in the atmosphere? Well, former U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commissioner Peter Bradford, he's a good friend of mine and a fellow Vermonter, has said that, here's his quote, "Trying to solve global warming by building nuclear power plants is like trying to solve global hunger by serving caviar." So not only is the cost of a nuclear plant too high, but also the time to reduce the carbon dioxide is too long. 15 years before you begin to make a dent from a plant that's committed to now to the time it goes online, it's just too long. We can put a solar collector up or a wind farm on the order of a year. So we've got high expense and long delivery times. Well, the nuclear industry would have you believe that there's nothing else available in the world to reduce carbon dioxide other than this massive investment in nuclear power. And I think that's wrong. While we're building these 5,000 nuclear plants over the next 15 years, $50 trillion is committed to. It's tied up. And what that means is that it's unavailable to fight a carbon dioxide buildup by another vehicle. What that's called in economics is opportunity cost. If you commit to spending money on something, you lose the opportunity to spend that money on something else. And my point is, could $50 trillion be better invested right now on a now solution rather than committed to over 15 years to a project that doesn't show fruit until it's completed? So my answer is absolutely there are alternatives. So instead of looking at this 50 trillion, which is just mind-boggling, I wanted to take a different perspective and compare nuclear power to the production cost of energy. And I'm going to use those two power plants in England as the example, or Hinkley C is what they're called. The British government has committed to spend $32 billion on these power plants, and they've entered a contract with two French companies, the largest nuclear producer in the world, Areva and EDF, the French nuclear. And they've committed that they will pay 16 cents a kilowatt hour for the output from those two nuclear power plants. And that's a number that's a month old. So that's my benchmark going forward. A new nuclear power plant, this isn't the cost to your house, which includes transmission and distribution. This is the cost as it leaves the power plant. A new nuclear power plant, we've got a contract in place now in England that says it's going to cost 16 cents a kilowatt hour to produce nuclear power in 2023. And after that, there's escalation provisions too. So, to put that in perspective, the cost to produce power here in Illinois from a nuclear power plant is about 5 cents, maybe even 4. But we're talking about new nukes are going to be 4 times more expensive than the nuclear units we have now in Illinois. Well, so what would that 16 cents buy if I were going to spend it not on a nuclear plant, but on an alternative? And the answer is it buys a lot. There's two ways of producing and minimizing energy consumption. First, I'm a production guy. I build power plants, so I always think we can build our way out of this. And I'll talk about ways of producing that power for less than 16 cents. But there's the other half of it too, which is the consumption side. How can we reduce consumption and would it cost less than 16 cents? So those two are the alternatives I'm going to propose and compare it to that benchmark of 16 cents. My conclusion is that all the alternatives are 1, less expensive, 2, already available, and 3, come online a lot quicker than a nuclear plant that's going to be built for operation potentially as early as 2023. So implementing my plan, which is essentially a renewable-based generation and a focus on reducing demand through energy efficiency, I think will reduce the carbon dioxide buildup in the atmosphere, 1, faster, and 2, for less money. So let's look at the energy production side first. That's sort of what I did for a living. Every form of energy that's renewable can be created for less than 16 cents. To generate a kilowatt from a windmill is around 4 or 5 cents. Some people would say even less. And here in Illinois, you know that's true because Exelon is threatening to shut down 5 nuclear plants because they can't compete with the cost of wind anymore. To generate a kilowatt from solar costs about 6 or 7 cents a kilowatt hour. And that price is plummeting. I heard a great quote the other day that solar is not a fuel. Solar is a technology. And as such, all the technology costs are plummeting over time. So each of those are half of what the British are willing to pay, the 16 cents the British are willing to pay. Well, we all know that the wind doesn't blow consistently and the sun doesn't shine every day. Well, the nuclear industry would have you believe that humankind is smart enough to develop techniques to store nuclear waste for 250,000 years. But at the same time, humankind is so dumb, we can't figure out a way of storing solar electricity overnight. And to me, that doesn't make sense. Well, today's an important day in history, not just because you're having this meeting, but because Elon Musk, he's the founder of PayPal, and then he rolled that money into SpaceX and Solar City, and he's also the force behind the Tesla automobile. About 10 o'clock tonight, he's holding a press conference, and he's going to announce he's going to build industrial-scale storage batteries. And while the announcement is still 2 hours away, it appears that he'll be able to produce these storage batteries for about 2 cents a kilowatt hour. That's an enormous breakthrough. Suddenly, the issue of can we store electricity overnight economically is off the table. If you add the 6 cents or 7 cents for solar plus 2 cents for storage, you're at 9 cents. Hinkley Point's at 16. The 4 or 5 cents for wind plus the 2 cents for storage, you're at 7 or 8 cents. Hinkley Point's at 16. So the nuclear argument that they are the only 24/7 source is off the table now because Elon Musk has convinced me that industrial scale storage is in fact possible and it's here. So now let's take a look at the other side. So that's the production side. We can produce power through renewables for roughly half what Hinkley Point is committed to generating electricity for. So the flip side of this is the second area, which is can we consume power differently? Conserving the kilowatt of power. Her apartment and his office have single pane windows. And when the air conditioning's on, the single pane windows get moisture on the outside. So basically, she and her doctor and thousands of other people in Florida are paying to reduce the temperature in the Everglades. This is not a good system. Well, Florida's solution to this problem is to build 4 new nuclear power plants that cost $48 billion, rather than develop a program to invest in double pane or triple pane windows on the buildings. We have a consumption, as consumers, with a production, we can produce our way out of this problem. And what I'm suggesting is that's producing our way out of the problem with renewables is half the issue. But conserving our way out through better energy efficiency is the other half. Another example, there's an iPhone app that you can monitor your temperature at home while you're at the office. And it can warn you if it drops below 55 so the dog doesn't get too cold, or above 80 so the dog doesn't get too hot. And you can turn it on and off from home. But as you're leaving the office, you can kick it on, and whatever time you leave the office, the temperature at home either goes down if it's hot or up if it's cold. An iPhone app. Enormous energy conservation there. My favorite, server farms, the great computer in the sky, the cloud, if you will, runs on these things called server farms, and they eat an enormous amount of energy, and they throw off an awful lot of heat. Well, there's a company in France called Quarnot. It's Q-A-R-N-O-T, Quarnot Computing. And what they've done is they've taken these huge server farms and broken them down, and they put servers in the basement of offices throughout Paris. So now there is no waste heat. The heat from that server is what heats the building. I think that's really clever, and essentially eliminates the waste heat of the problem. Experts will say that 20 to 40% of the energy we consume can be saved through efficient conservation and through energy efficiency. Last example is, do you care when your freezer goes into the de-ice cycle? No. Well, through computing, the grid will control the demand, so that instead of having high peaks, as the energy demands go up, it will begin to shut down appliances in your house for maybe 15 minutes. The last thing we're going to do is kill all the food in your refrigerator. But do you really care when that refrigerator or the freezer turns on and off if it doesn't destroy the food inside? So this technique will turn on and off appliances and reduce demand. Well, there's thousands of other ways to produce power, and there's thousands of other ways to save power. I just refer you to two sources. The first is a book called Reinventing Fire by Amory Lovins. Amory is an energy economist. And the second is another book by Dr. Arjun Makhijani, and it's called Carbon-Free and Nuclear-Free by 2050. And Arjun's book is available online for free, and you can get a softcover copy for $15. Carbon-Free, nuclear-free by 2050. I talked to Arjun just last month, and he said he was wrong. The title should be Carbon-Free, nuclear-free by 2035. Well, the last person I would recommend is Bill McKibben. We've all talked about him, and as I understand it, he's been here. And Bill's position is, and it's fine too, there is no single silver bullet to solving the global climate change issue. But there is silver buckshot. And there are thousands of opportunities to either increase the power that we use or decrease the power that we consume that are a heck of a lot cheaper than the 16 cents that new nuclear is going to come in at. So what's standing in the way of renewable energy, a renewable future? I think the time for large power plants is over. Rapidly expanding computer technology has completely changed the distribution of energy. It's just like the technology in your cell phone that has totally eliminated wires to a central switching station. The concept of central power is going the same way. These changes can be implemented immediately. And that's the other piece of this. We know how to insulate a building. We know how to put double and triple pane windows on walls. We know how to build windmills or put solar cells up. These are immediate changes. We don't have to invest $50 trillion and wait 15 years for that to come to fruition. And so the second difference here is that the construction time for these 5,000 large nuclear reactors or 50,000 small reactors, it means that global warming is going to be much worse by the time nuclear ever gets its sneakers tied and gets out the door. So my position, and I think I've proven it, is that building nuclear power plants takes money from less expensive and more effective solutions and actually makes global warming worse. Which would you choose to get the best bang for your buck? That's what this is really all about, is bang for your buck. Would you build 5,000 new nukes and ultimately reduce the amount of power that we produce from other means by 20%, but it'll take 15 years and tie up $50 trillion? Or would you take new renewables at about half the price, 6 to 8 cents, and new conservation measures at about a quarter of the price, and achieve the same outcome beginning immediately and lasting no more than 10 years? My position is we can have a 30% reduction between renewables creating our power and energy conservation eliminating the need for power. We can see a 30% reduction before the nuclear plants have their sneakers tied and are off and running. The 20th century paradigm of central station power is like a tree with really large leaves on it. Just a few leaves, but really large. The 21st century paradigm is more like a tree with thousands of small leaves. That's more holistic and more in tune with nature. Dozens of cities, including my hometown of Burlington, Vermont, are 100% powered by renewable electricity from distributed sources right now. So Americans use less than 4%, or less than 4% of the people on the planet are Americans, and we use 25%. We create 25% of the carbon dioxide that enters the atmosphere. So the solution to global climate change starts with us. Starts with you. What are you going to do when you leave here? Well, what I suggest you do is you talk to the people and the Northwestern funds should not be invested in coal. The funds should not be invested in oil. They should not be invested in gas. And in my opinion, they should not be invested in new nuclear either. They should be invested in both conservation and in small modular renewables, not small modular reactors. Thank you.